Yeah, got it. I just got a notification saying it's recording, and I'm like, yeah, that's the point.
Yep, and that is how we're starting the podcast.
That works for me.
Congratulations, you've done our intro. All right, welcome. This is Airborne Canines, the Dog Dialectic Podcast. I am your host, Ashley Jacobson. I am joined, as always, by my beautiful co-host, Kelly Ortega from Texas. Kelly, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. How are
Glad,
you?
glad you could join us. I'm doing awesome. Everything's wonderful. I just got new hearing aids, so I can actually hear everybody now. So today we have a super special guest, Dan Richards. Dan is the owner, founder of Cross Tier Canine. So Dan, introduce yourselves. Tell us a little bit about what you do. Tell us a little bit about your business, and then we'll start to get into the topic for today.
For sure. So the business I've got here, I do like as most people find, like most of the money for like dog training is in the pet dog side. So that's the primary thing that I do. But then I'm also a consultant with like police departments in my immediate area. We're located in Billings, Montana. So I've been working sporadically with the Billings PD Canine program. We actually just did a hard service tracking seminar with them in October. And then I've done like some bite work and stuff with them as well. Kind of showed them some like decoying techniques and stuff like that. But yeah, that's what my business is doing. Me on the other hand, I was in the military for 10 years, kind of like wasn't really doing much with dogs besides like owning pet dogs. And I thought they were really cool. And I was actually given the opportunity while I was in the Marine Corps before deployment to become a explosives dog handler. And I goofed up the interview because I was stupid and I ended up not being a handler.
Oh no.
And yeah, so like I was actually really hurt about that because I was like, man, this sounds great. Like I love dogs. Like I want to learn how to work them. And the interview was weird, and I ended up not getting it. And then we got the guy that did get it. He's a good dude, but that dog was a lot. Like it was like a big lab that if you didn't keep up on the training, it would become, kind of a nuisance a lot of the time. But it all worked out. And then kind of on a whim, because I had been involved with like the tactical stuff a lot. Whether it be like on civilian side or on the military side. And I got really bored with it because like I'm sick of teaching the same thing a million times to people who don't really care about it, or they only care about the cool looking stuff, which is usually the stuff that doesn't matter. And so I was talking to a buddy of mine who has done like gun dog stuff, and I was like, man, like, and he was a medic, and I was like, man, like I am so tired of this. And he's like, well, like just, pick something new, like just something random. And I'm like, well, I like dogs. And he's like, well, do dog stuff. I'm like, all right, cool. And around that time is when I got Rook. And then that's when I had come out to talk to you for the first time, where I kind of explained like at least somewhat what I kind of wanted to do with them and stuff like that. And then you brought up Jerry Bradshaw of Tar Heel. And during that time, I was listening to the Working Dog Radio podcast, and Jerry was on that. And I was like, all right, well, where's this guy at? And you told me he's like up north. And I looked it up and I was like, oh, hey, like that's cool. That's right there. And then during that time, I'd been injured in the military. So I was kind of on my way out, and I had Voc Rehab available for me. So I was like, I called up Tar Heel and did the giant military bureaucratic crap necessary to go up there for school. I went up and did their 6-month program. And since I was in the area, I kind of hung around and went to like the Sandhills club up there to decoy. And then I'd hang out at Tar Heel and help with their handler course. And then I actually was a tactical consultant up there for Tar Heel's handler course briefly, because the dude that used to do it, he had to retire. And so he recommended me come up to be the tactical consultant. So I went up there and did that for a couple of weeks, and that was a blast. And then now I came back, and now I've been doing this, training pet dogs, and we kind of have a little unofficial club for bite work. And well, it's not really bite work. We call it Bite Club, but it's not under like PSA or like anything like that, because like some people bring out like protection dogs because they just want somebody to work them, and what it is an exchange. It's a club that exchanges dog training knowledge more than anything. So it's like, okay, you got your dog, you want to teach a focus heel, we'll help you with that. And then it's like, well, I've got my puppy, I need that dog decoyed for. I've got a relatively experienced decoy over there. And he decoys for my dogs, I decoy for his dogs, and then we do like detection and tracking, stuff like that. And then in fact, that decoy and I are actually going to a seminar that Ben Lipinski's putting on in about 50 minutes from here, actually next week. And so I'm stoked about that because like I get to go and get a refresher on this stuff. And then my decoy, he's done other seminars, but he's not experienced in decoy work. So he gets to go up there, and it's for law enforcement canine. So he gets to learn that side because he's a PD guy. So, but he's not a canine handler. So he gets to go and, learn that side of things, which is really cool. So yeah, that's kind of what's going on my end.
Nice. And I heard you got a new puppy too. So tell us a little bit about your new puppy.
Yeah. So so the Mals are everywhere, and so are Dutchies. Not as much as Mals, but Mals are everywhere. And I was like, and I like being different. And so I spent about a year trying to figure out, how I can get a Tervuren puppy. And I got a hold of a lady named Chelsea over in Connecticut, I believe. And we talked about the dogs, talked about her what she does with dogs and different things like that. Essentially, I had taken from like 5 different breeders and eventually came down to her. And then she already was involved with PSA, and her husband was a decoy. So it was like, okay, this is good, and then check the lineage through like workingdog.eu or whatever, that shows you like what all the titles of the parents and stuff are like, and like all the parents and stuff are like really well titled, and so got her. And I mean ideally, right, like everybody gets into a sport. Well, I would assume everybody gets into a sport with their brand new puppy. They want to be the next Hokage, and they want to be like the best ever and be a PSA 3 and senior decoy and judge and all that. And it's like, yeah, like I would love to do that, but
I hope so.
Take it one step at a time here. Like let's not get ahead of ourselves. And so I've been working with her. Talked to Jerry and Taylor up at Tar Heel, just like, what their thoughts would be for training a puppy. And pretty much unanimously across the board with everybody I've talked to that does police dog and like PSA style stuff, they're like, hey, like work on essentially like let them be naturally expressive with their predatory instinct and such. And like, don't do a ton of obedience. You don't want them like, just like always looking at you and like, what are you doing? What are you doing? All the time. Like they need to have a little bit more outward focus because they need to be able to be confident working independently of you. And so they recommended doing lots of like detection style stuff and tracking and things that are like predatory in nature. And so we've been doing a lot of that, and then decoying as well, which has been a lot of fun because I have not. So like having a Rook who is not like really bred for it, which has been a fantastic learning experience for me, because it's like, well, nothing is easy, right? But when you have a dog that is specifically bred for something, they tend to do better at that thing than dogs that aren't, And so like you have a dog, like a Mal, that's like an absolute rock star, and like you do bite work with it. And it's like, wow, he bit the sleeve and he's holding on, and we're just going to work grip development. Like, like that's great. And I love that stuff. With the Rook, it's wild because like he's super defensive, he's not prey heavy. And so it's been a lot of like figuring out how to generate that confidence, and watching like Ben Lipinski and stuff like work with him was really helpful for me with my new puppy, because I got to see like the intricacies of working with dogs that are not bred for it. And then like, because there's a lot of timing involved in that and how you're doing like your decoy work and stuff. And so, I mean, I've been primarily doing the development with her, which is probably ill-advised, but to me, once she is on a sleeve, I'm going to be moving all of the responsibility for decoy work onto like essentially my resident decoy, and he's going to be doing it for me Because again, like I don't want her looking at me like you're the guy that rewards me. And then also let's move in like even further into the future. Say I do all of her bite work all the time. There's some potential for some conflict there, you know, like we go out and it's like, you know, send her on a bite and she like turns around and is like, hey, you look good, you know? And so I want to avoid that as well. And you know, there's other issues with it too, but you know, I'm trying to avoid all that as much as I can, but also working with all I got. Because here in Billings, this isn't Sanford, you know, like you don't have like 3 clubs. In fact, you don't have a club. The closest PSA club is 4 hours away. And I am not driving once a month, even like 4 hours one way and then 4 hours back to work a puppy for like, you know, 15 minutes. Like I'll find somebody here and show them how to do it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And especially, I think that's especially important, you know, not working your own dog for less experienced people. I think you're going to be set up for success because you know what you're doing. I think the biggest reason why people really say don't work your own dog is because most people don't know what they're doing.
Right. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And it's cool. One of the things that I like about this puppy, right, is it's okay. So first off, it's fun because it's a bite dog puppy. Like that's cool. You know, like everybody loves that kind of stuff. But then the other cool part is like the litters and their disposition. Because I followed the other, I think they've got one other litter from this marriage. I think they call it marriage. I'm not big on breeder stuff, but and I've followed the parents, I followed the other puppies and stuff, and there seems to be a pretty high level of consistency between their dispositions and stuff like that, which is super cool because then now I have the opportunity where we have essentially a semi-controlled dog, right? Like from like a disposition standpoint, but then we have multiple people that have different methodologies to how they train. So like, for example, like I'm not doing any obedience at all at first. Like she doesn't learn to walk on leash. She's an absolute terrorist. And so she goes in the house and she's like nuking everything available. And she's super possessive. And
that sounds really familiar to one of my dogs.
Yeah. Sorry. And it's just like, and it's like, she's a total handful. And then on the opposite side, her sister, and I don't remember where this person lives, but she wants to do PSA as well. But she is like, in my opinion, you know, she's like, got a new puppy. Like, let's feed, you know, let's get our focus heel generated. And that definitely works for some people. So like, what the interesting part to me is going to be when these dogs have gotten to trials, how they're going to perform, because they're very similar when they start. Or these 2 dogs were very similar dogs when you like look at them, the breeder, right? So as they continue to grow and they continue to be exposed to different contexts, environments, and situations, and then also have completely almost opposite training methodologies, that's going to be really cool to see how they perform and like what the difference is. Because I mean, I'm not going to be surprised if she goes out to her first trial and she absolutely destroys the obedience portion. Like it won't surprise me at all. And I very well could fail. I have no doubt in my mind. Like if you don't fail a few times, you're not trying. So like if I go out there and fail obedience, I'm going to be like, yeah, well, big surprise, you know?
That's my biggest fear with Daria is the obedience on like the early levels, because she could care less about me. She's like, screw you. You're the least important person to me. I want to go do anything but hang out with you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so thankfully, though, one thing with this puppy is, from what I can tell, she's very willing to work independently, but she's not like some dogs. Like there's been police dogs that I've trained that are like, they stand there at the end of the leash and they're like looking away from the handler, you know, and they like everything is like the handler just exists as a tree and they don't even like consider the handler is there. And then it takes like a ton of time to build obedience on the dogs, you know? And so like, I would prefer that over a dog that's like, hey, can I get a pet? You got any food? Like, what do you got? What are we going to do? Like that, like, that's great for a pet dog.
I think that's a huge factor too, is like the way, you know, you say you prefer that, right? And, you know, me as someone who wants to eventually be very competitive in sports like PSA. I got Daria with that intent, but I'm realizing now, like working with her, I do not prefer that. I would sell her for a grilled cheese sandwich some days because I'm just like, this is so painful for me to try and work with this type of dog. Whereas most people, like all of the big names who have worked with Daria, like love her. And I'm like, take her.
Oh yeah. I mean, like there's been times, so you know, like Jinx is my puppy's name. So Jinx is like outside and she, you know, loves the game keep away and she's super fast. And like at 2 a.m. Oh, actually, this is just the other day at 2 a.m. because I've got a baby monitor because she's out in the garage and it was like 16 degrees the other night. And so I had the baby monitor out here looking in, and the heater was kind of pointed towards her kennel, and I've got a blanket like around the kennel. And like I'm not new to dogs having loose articles of things around kennels. Like I know it can happen. So I was like, all right, tighten it down so she can't get a hold of it. Cool. We should be good. And it's been here for a month and it's been fine. And the other night I hear, or I wake up to like the light on my baby monitor going off, which means she's doing something noisy and annoying in there. And so I like turn it on and all I see is fluff everywhere. And I'm like, son of a gun. And I'm like freaking out because I'm like, if she ate this and now she's getting blocked, like that could be a serious problem. Yep. So like I run down there at 2 a.m, get this puppy out. And of course I open it and then she's like, bam, into me. And she's like, what are we doing? You know, and like pick her up. And then I put her, and she doesn't want to go outside, and probably because it's cold out. And so I'm like trying to get her outside, and she's like trying to bite stuff in my house. Finally get her outside. Then I go and I check, make sure that like she hasn't really, as well as I can, identify whether or not she's eaten any of it, which she didn't seem to. But she took like 1.5 feet of, somehow got a hold of it, 1.5 feet of the stupid blanket and pulled it through into the kennel and just tore it all up. And I'm like, great. And so I got all out, and then I bring her back in, and then now I bring her back into the garage, and this is where she does bite work. And so she comes in and she's like, what are we doing? I'm like, this is great, man. I've never done bite work at 2 a.m. And I'm like, oh my gosh, shut up. And then finally I like put her away, and then I go back to sleep. Then my kid wakes up like 5 minutes later, and then I'm like awake like almost all night. I'm like, this.
Oh no.
Oh, I hate this dog.
Yep, that's okay. Hey, that's what working puppies are all about. So let's get started for today's topic. So you selected today's topic, and when you brought it up, there was kind of 3 different points to it, and you said that they're all connected. So I'm really excited to see how this happens. So the topic we discussed is, I screw up this word every single time. I know what it is. I say it all the time, but I always screw it up. Anthropomorphization among pet dog owners.
Yep.
The second part is going to be training canine handlers like their dogs. I'm really interested to see where that's going to go. And then also training for sport versus training for military and law enforcement.
Yep.
So I'm interested to see how all these pieces kind of go together.
Yeah. So I'll start with the sport versus police dog work, right? Okay. Now when we're talking about sport, because like whether you're doing sport or you're doing police work, right? You're a team. You're a canine team. You know, you have a handler, you have the dog, right? Now, when I'm talking about the difference between doing sport and doing like police work, you have for the dog, and I think I saw this, you mentioned this on your Facebook or on your on Airborne Canine Facebook, that the dog doesn't know like when the trial is, right? Like it doesn't realize that's the trial necessarily, right? Like, like you have cueing differences and contextual differences, right? But like to the dog, like it's not like, oh, today's the trial day, you know, like, and so like, you know, similarly, like with police work, right? You can do like a bunch of training, right? And then like all of a sudden you go out there for, you know, whatever you're doing, and you get a canine call, and you know, like it's a felony stop, and instead of the guy ditching and running, he comes and attacks you. And if you haven't done a lot of, you know, like working the dog and working on like drive channeling and stuff so the dog can be confidently engaging like an aggressive suspect, they could just run the dog off, or like the dog will bite and then take off. And now you've got a dog that's running around on the highway, and then a guy that's running at you maybe with a knife, that you didn't see when you deployed the dog. And so like, but the big difference between these, right, is like when you're training for PSA, and I'm going to use PSA for example, because PSA does a good job of it, mainly because Jerry does both, or Jerry trains for both, right? So like with PSA, as you move through the ranks of PSA, things become more surprising, and then, but then like, which seems to me, and I've never specifically talked to Jerry about this or listened to him say anything about this, but to me, that mirrors an attempt, at least, to create a more realistic scenario that is more akin to like a real world situation where you might need to get a bite. Now, the big difference I've seen, right, is like when you go out there to do PSA, right, and you go to a trial, right, you're given a certain amount of information on where you physically need to be, what the dog needs to be doing, different things like that, right? And and there's safety reasons for that, and then there's reasons for like judging purposes, and and it's very understandable why that's done, right? But when you're doing police work, you don't ever get that. You get out and like you might get out of your cruiser and you're going to send the dog, and that moment that you turn to look away, this dude just ran at you and is right here. And now how do I get my dog out? Do I need to get my dog out? Like now I'm in a fist fight with this. Like, what do I do? And so like when it comes to training the dog between the two, right? Like PSA, you're going to have a much higher level of obedience on, or actually any sport, probably. You're going to have a much higher level of obedience for the dogs. And the reason being is because the handlers are intimately involved in, and it's their hobby. You can almost not call it a hobby, to be involved with that training of the dog in the obedience and the protection work. But with like canine handlers, the unfortunate reality is that you just don't have that, right? Like some of them may be really committed, but they don't have the funds to actually do that. They don't have a club nearby. I'm not 100% sure about what the liability situation would be if you did have a police canine showing up to like a PSA club. I've never looked into that. I don't know, but they don't do it, at least not that I've seen.
I'm pretty sure that would be governed by the police organization, whether or not they would allow that. But I'm pretty sure in most instances, because it's government regulated, they would not allow it.
Yeah, it's going to be departmentally dependent. And then also like, what is their certification, like which certification they're using, that will probably come into play. And then also then you have the like admin, like, oh no, we can't do it because we don't know what this would look like in court, which is understandable on one end, but on the other hand, it's like we deal with red tape. Like, you and I have both been in the military, we know how that is. So it's kind of like one of those things as well. And so like, and this kind of gets into, and this actually flows pretty easily into like training handlers like their dogs, right? So like, if you're really involved with canine training and you haven't like had to train people to do tactical work, right? So a difficulty that you can run into is treating your scenarios that you're training handlers on like it's a trial, where you're given, okay, you're going to roll up, you're going to see this vehicle is going to do this, then you're going to send, and like, then this is going to happen, then you're going to move up, right? But like, that's not giving credit to the handler for what they're actually designed for. And you're not gaining as much from it as a handler, because the reality is that you need to be able to show up to a situation, think on your feet, and then cross-reference everything that's occurring with departmental policy and, like different, like use of force restrictions, and then, send the dog, not send the dog, and stuff like that. Right. And so like, that can become an issue. And I've run into that like myself. I've done that before, which is why I'm talking about this. Like, I mean, like I've trained guys on tactics and stuff in the military, and like I got in the dog world and I was just like, so like, we do dog stuff. This is how dogs work, operant classical conditioning. Here's the prong collar, like stuff like that, like over and over and over. And then like I end up working with some handlers and I end up like regimenting like giving them a timeline of how everything is going to work, you know, and I think lots of other people will fall into this, you know. And then I'm like, well, there needs to be an inherent level of uncertainty, because that's the only way you, as a human, that's how you learn, you know, like you have to have that stress. You know, with dogs, we set them up for success, right? Like if you're training a dog to do like vehicle extraction, right, and they've never done a vehicle extraction before, well, you need to show them a very easily achievable picture for how to perform that the very first time, and then you can kind of start walking that back to more difficult things. And it's like, sure, we do crawl, walk, run kind of stuff with handlers or with like military personnel, stuff like that. But with humans, we're like so significantly, principally more intelligent, that like you should, like once you have the basics down, you don't need to show people like like if we've done raids on or like done like a felony like search warrant on a house, right, like, and it's a double wide, right, I shouldn't need to then show the picture in like an easily achievable scenario for like a single wide, you know, like the context, like humans by design, we can bridge context extremely quickly. Like we identify those patterns extremely quickly. So the way that you like, and then what happens is when you have guys that are like handlers, or whether they be handlers or not, right? Like they're performing some kind of tactical situation. If they already know where everything's going to be, and it's like almost like they're fed all of like the pre-trialing requirements of where they need to be, what they need to do, what the dog needs to be doing. If you feed them all that, they don't take it seriously. They start kind of like because they don't need to, like there's nothing stressful about it, you know, and regardless of like you can create like artificial stress and go, okay, well now we're going to do it with gas masks. It's like, well, that's dumb. Like, why would I do it with gas masks if I can just create a scenario that has a sufficient enough uncertainty that they actually have to think about what they're doing before they do it, and because that's exactly what they need to be doing in the field. Yeah. Right.
So okay, so I definitely like see where you're going with that idea. I know we're getting a little bit like broad, so we can break it down to smaller parts for sure. And, you know, I definitely love some of the aspects and thinking about the differences between the sport world and the military working world. And you can probably agree with me, or you can disagree if you want, but, you know, it looks like, you know, in PSA, in like the level 2s maybe, but definitely in the level 3s, like the scenarios we're seeing are far beyond anything you'd realistically see in the real world, right? You're not going to have somebody like, you're not going to have a pack of 4 dudes running at you and your dog with shotguns, chainsaws, buckets of water, with like firecrackers going off in the background and building exploding and whatever craziness they come up with next year for nationals. It's very unrealistic, but you know, that's because it's a sport, right? We're aiming to go as far as we possibly can to see just what these trainers and these dogs are capable of.
Yeah.
But the difference is in like sport, it's a strategy game. It's a strategy game for the handler too. Like, how can I save these points? We talk about this all the time in handler, you know, education for a sport is where can you save points as in smart handling? For instance, I did my trial this weekend for my GPR3, and everyone knows IGP trialing is super easy. It's super simple, clear. But you know, my dog made a mistake. We did our blind search, so we do 6 blinds. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and on 6 they go to revere. So he did all 5 blinds beautifully, perfect. It was wonderful. And then I sent him to revere. He goes in the blind, sees the decoy, and he starts coming back to me. I'm like, well, fuck.
Oh.
But immediately the judge is like, send him again, send him again. Now I know my dog, if he's over by the blind coming back to me and I'm over here going, no, revere, 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 like I'm going to zero out that event. Right, yeah. I'm going to get 0 points if I just keep giving him commands. And I know he's not going to do it from that distance. So I literally waited until he came all the way back to me. I turned him around and then sent him. So I only lost like 1 point for an extra command. But the thing is like, it teaches the strategy for you as a handler. And, you know, I can imagine that when they're going through those walkthroughs and give you that information in these extremely complicated scenarios, you're taking that opportunity to figure out, how am I going to manage this and get, the most accurate result for my dog? And, I would assume on law enforcement side, and I know we talked about this at length previously, is strategizing what you as a handler need to do in order to be successful in complicated, unexpected situations as well.
Yeah. Well, and then the other thing with like canine, right, is like, there's a certain reality with police work, is that like you just kind of inherently, unless you're doing like a very deliberate like search warrant or something like that, you're almost always at the disadvantage of initiative, right? So like you show up to a situation and it starts unfolding and you're reacting. Like it's like and like in most sports, right? Like so I've done like competitive shooting. And like I've done USPSA, where I compare USPSA very similar to like PSA, because for USPSA, you go up and it's like a surprise to you what the scenario is, but you get to walk the line for the scenario, and you get to essentially like act out what you're going to do. Like you do your shots, you know when you're going to do your reloads, you figure out when you're going to do it ahead of time. That way, when you go to actually perform, you're not really having to think, like make decisions on the fly. Now you still do make decisions on the fly, because like you can't account for everything that's going to happen in the scenario. And that's something that I like about PSA, is like they make an attempt to force the person to make some more decisions on the fly because of the complexity of the scenarios. But you have a high level of proactivity. I think that's a word, proactivity for what you're going to do, compared to like police work, wherein it's like, okay, we've got a felony stop. We have a very limited amount of information about like exactly what's going on. Like from a visual standpoint, okay, I've got my lights on this vehicle. I see one guy, or maybe I don't see anybody. I am assuming there's somebody in the car. Do I dog the car? Do I not dog the car? Once I dog the car, where am I going? Like, do I go right up to my dog? Do I, maybe like, do I run up to him, or do I pull lethal, maybe a flashlight, watch the back? I'm not a police officer. I'm not saying like what you should do. I'm saying that like comparatively, you are already disadvantaged, because you're going, okay, what's next? Okay, now what do I do about that? Okay, this is new. What do I do about this? And it's constantly like that. And in PSA, if you screw up, well, like we know of tragedies that have happened with any sport that requires fight work with bad decoys, but thankfully that's pretty much the worst thing that can happen, right, in PSA. And it's a tragedy regardless. But when you're talking about police work, you're talking about every send on that dog is somewhat of a sacrifice. You're going, okay, I trust ideally that my dog can take this guy, and the dog trusts me to an extent to not send my dog on somebody who's going to kill it or seriously injure it, right? So I'm sending this dog as a sacrifice to go, hey, we need to get that guy, right? And I've got your back as much as I can, but then if things go south, like the handler can die or the dog can die, right? So the level of intensity of the failure of making the right decision, sometimes even making the right decision, it just not working, is extremely high, and so that's another issue with it, right? Is like you have to generate training for police work that is, at least in the last like week or so, once these guys actually know what they're doing, it needs to be extremely difficult, like they should, if they're not making some mistakes, they're not training, like it's like with dogs, we work them so that preferably they make as few mistakes as possible. Right. But with humans, once they're in that last week of training or whatever they're doing, once they believe themselves to be experienced, they need to be doing stuff that really puts them through the ringer, which is like HRD. That's what like HRDs and stuff are for, which is really cool.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Okay, cool. So now how does that tie into kind of the other side of this conversation of the anthropomorphization?
Yeah, so it's kind of just like the reverse, right? So like when you have and I'm gonna bounce back to the other one because like because I deal more intimately with the law enforcement guys in regards to like dog training because of the way that it is. I don't see this as much on the pet dog side, like personally in a way that I can change anything about it. But like, I mean, we've all seen posts about people that it's like, you know, you get your stupid like Facebook posts where people post a picture of their Malinois coming out of a crate, you know, and people, why would you keep that dog in the crate? Like, blah, blah. And it's like, this isn't a kid. And then they'll even say it. They'll be like, they'll say stuff like, well, you wouldn't put your child in a crate. It's like, yeah, well, my child isn't a dog, you know?
Have
like,
you heard of a crib?
Yeah, I put a child in a
oh
crate.
my gosh. And that's something. What'd you say?
I said I would put a kid in a crate, but that's why I don't have kids.
How many children have you known have like fallen out of cribs when they've learned how to climb over the side of it? Why doesn't it have a roof on it? Just put it in a goddamn crate.
I used to pull myself up and like flip over, and that's why I'm stupid.
Oh, it's a little baby. Her hair is so short.
Yeah, she's I don't know if it's gonna get very like super long like Rook's.
Yeah.
She definitely has like a totally different like pattern of fur than he does, which is pretty cool. Like it's like almost well, it's curlier.
Yeah.
His is like really straight.
You could have just gotten a fluffy Mal from Janet's breedings.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I just like fluffy dogs. Like,
And then you could have just told everybody that it was a turb and it'd have been just the same off.
well, then it's like it's a Belgian Shepherd with long hair. Is it a Mal or is it a turb? Like, ask a European and then ask an American. Well, you'll get two different answers. So
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay, what were we talking about?
We were talking about, so I was talking about like creating dogs versus creating children.
Oh yeah.
And so funny thing about that is that like, so when my son was born and like I was like at Tar Heel and stuff like that and came back and stuff. It was so hard for me to not call his crib a kennel. Like I would say that so many times that if the FBI is listening, they could probably tell CPS that I'm a bad person because like it was like daily. I'd be like, yeah, he was crying in his kennel again. And I went in there, you know, and I'm like, his crib, he was in his crib, you know.
Oh my God.
It was nuts. But yeah, like, and like, and this all really ties together in almost, I don't want to get too philosophical, but it all kind of ties together in kind of like an ethical thing, right? Is like, and this goes for people and dogs or any animal or anything that is living that you interact with, right? That you care about, right? My dogs do not love the same way humans love. They also don't receive love in the same way humans receive love, right? So the way I love my son is going to be completely different than the way I love my dog. And that's not because the dog, I consider that it has nothing to do with the consideration of value of either. It has everything to do with I care deeply about both, and I want to make sure that they are receiving the care that they can absorb as much as I can, right? And if that means kenneling my dog, it means I'm going to kennel my dog. You know, if that means I don't go up and like to random dogs on the street and then like, oh, dog, and then like grab them and hold them and give them a hug like you might with a human, that's what that means, you know.
God, I hope not.
Yeah, I don't like being touched, so everybody can treat me like a dog. Like that's fine. Like I'm cool.
Don't
with
make
it,
direct
but...
eye contact. No talk, no touch, no eye contact.
Yeah. Like if you come up to me, like I'm not a particularly avoidant dog, so you know, if you come up to me staring at my eyes, we might have an initial problem. But but yeah, so like. And then like, you know, and I mean, there's like a million different things that like people who I believe they truly mean the best, you know, like, and they want to provide an environment for their dog that the dog can thrive in. but the way that they're actually doing that is detrimental,
Oh
right?
yeah, you see that all the time.
I have
So like a lot of like human aggression cases are because of that very thing, you know? And I mean, you're going to have way more experience with that than me because like I am much more on the side of training dogs to be more aggressive than I am on the side of training them to be less aggressive. But like, you know, you see people go up and it's like they go up and they're like, oh, you know, I got to introduce myself to the dog, right? And their way of introducing it, like, smell my hand. It's like, dogs, some dogs can smell cancer. Like
Yeah.
they smelled you well before you walked up. Like, you know, and I heard somebody say that. So that's been stuck in my head.
I feel like the most notable thing that is so common that I hear during our consultations is, well, I don't want to be food aggressive, so I stick my hand in his bowl while he's eating. I'm like, don't do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I get tied up, right? Because like I'll be thinking about how the dog perceives it. And like, I'm so like, I'll be watching a dog and I'll think so much about how he perceives it because I feel like any good trainer starts to kind of like, in some way accidentally bridge, like, okay, is it the dog thinking that, or is that me thinking that? You know, like, what am I interpreting this, or am I injecting this? You know, and you have to be careful about inject. You know, you can make educated guesses and then test if they're true or false, you know, but injecting can be a huge problem, you know. And I think that's really what most people do with dogs is they get a dog and they don't know anything about the breed. They're like, well, if I give it love, it'll be okay, you know. And it's like, man, you don't even know what love looks like to a dog, you know. And like for example, like you get a working dog, right? And like this, like, love to a working dog is not going to be like, you know, hanging out on the couch, giving lots of pets, well, hopefully not with a working dog, giving lots of pets and like feeding them a whole bunch because they kind of looked sad yesterday, you know, like stuff like that. Like you don't want to be enabling a lifestyle for that dog that generates a high level of anxiety, you know. And just like and I kind of like flip flop with this.
I feel like a lot of pet parents don't understand that you're absolutely right. And it's not just like working dogs, it's for a lot of pet dogs. If we're doing all these things like, hey, I'm snuggling with my dog, I'm getting him lots of goody treats and yummy food and, you know, all of these fancy things and giving him a fancy bed and all this stuff, because I love him, I want him to have this great life, they don't realize that it's creating the anxiety because they're not, the dogs are not getting what they need to be mentally and emotionally stable and confident.
Yeah. And then like I kind of because I do have this idea of like training dogs versus training people.
So like, I know, you know, a lot of clients come in and say, my dog is doing this weird thing, or my dog is having this emotional response. Why is my dog doing that? And I know a lot of trainers are like, oh, he's doing that because he's afraid, or he's doing that because he thinks this. And I'm like, how the fuck do you know that? Like,
yeah,
like I know dog behavior, I know dog psychology, but there's no possible way for me to know exactly what the dog is thinking or why is the dog doing this. And so I try so hard not to get hung up on what is the dog thinking, what is the dog feeling, whatever. But instead just focusing on, you know, is this something that is like, if it's a bad response, like is the dog acting fearful, acting negatively, acting aggressive, reactive, whatever, how can we change the situation to hopefully help our dog not have to feel the way that they're feeling to cause these behavioral responses. Don't get so hung up on why is the dog doing it.
Yeah, like, well, and then also if you're doing this like over the phone, because like I had a human aggressive Malinois that I worked on, and I ended up changing how we were going to go about training because like I went and did the evaluation and the dog seemed to be okay, you know, and I was like, all right, like we can work on this. This isn't the worst I've seen, so we'll work on this. And took the dog for the day school, and like once I got here, the dog wouldn't even approach me. I spent 5 days trying to get this dog to even take a hot dog from me, and I was like, all right. And I called up the handler, and I'm like, hey, this is not a long-term solution. What I'm doing right now, we'll have to figure something else out here.
We talked about this one, didn't we?
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
And I was like, I've got two options here. We can either do private classes. And the reason I would say do private classes is because then the fear level of just him being by himself without his person that gives him safety, that can allow us to at least put some obedience on him, give you a little more control over the dog. And then also it can lower the stress level. Then in the other option, I was like, I can just refund you all of it. It's fine. And you can find another trainer if you want, or, whatever you need to do is like, it's cool with me. And we ended up doing private classes. I've got to actually give her a call to schedule the next one. But like with that dog, it's like the first time I talked to her was over the phone, and she was asking questions like you were saying, like, why is he doing this? And I'm like, I have no idea. Like, I can't really answer that question because I can't see the situation. I can't actually read dogs' minds. I can just make some educated guesses of how they perceive a particular situation based on their reactions. Because, like, generally, if a dog is actually afraid of something, it's not confident in approaching it, it's probably going to try and move away, or it's going to go neutral so that it doesn't look like something scary to the thing it's afraid of. So it's like you can make some educated guesses, but there's always that potential you're wrong. And like, you don't want to be going in with like this theory of how the dog is perceiving a situation without ever actually testing it by changing contexts and different things like that, and like working the different variables. And then like, you're 4 days into it, like I was, and going like, wow, this is not working.
Right.
Like, and so like, that's and so like that's why like some people have called me up and they're like, well, we trust you, we'll just bring the dog by and we'll drop him off for a day school. I'm like, I love the confidence you have in my training. I absolutely love it. But you got to understand that I also understand this is a $1,000 commitment, and I have never seen this dog in my life. So I want to not waste your time and money, because you're going to be driving over here every day, twice a day, to pick up and drop off the dog. I'm not going to just take your money because I don't know what this dog is like. Like, he might have a massive phobia of humans or new environments that I simply will not get past in the first 5 days of training.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
But
and
yeah, like
the hard thing is that, like, when it comes to those in-person training, like the boarding of the day school, you can meet the dog, do the consultation in person even, and with the owner there, it's one way, but then as soon as they're gone, and you're not going to know until you start the program. And so, if you're willing to refund the whole amount, bless your heart. But I mean, it's still your time and your effort, and you're still deriving education about the dog for the owners. Is going to help them with their training progress anyways. Yeah. But
well,
yeah,
and like
I get that.
My training, like my day school program, because I understand the financial potential for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I do. So what I do is it's like 5 days. Well, actually, I've moved it up now. I'm doing because what I've seen is with 5 days of day school, there's a lot of variables, and I knew this before I started, but there's a lot of variables when they go home that can goof up what you've been doing all day. Yep. And so I've extended it because I have the time right now. I've extended it to being 2 weeks instead of 5 days, so instead it's 10 days, right?
Oh, bro, our minimum is 15 days.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. I mean, it just gives you more time to really, because to me, I want to give back a dog that you're like, whoa, like I didn't know it was possible to train a dog like that, right? Mm-hmm. And if I can't give you that dog, then you aren't paying me, and to me, the way I look at that is like, yeah, like I need to make money for sure. But if people are understanding that it's very safe to pay me that amount of money, mm-hmm. then they're not going to be like I'm going to get references or referrals. And that's exactly what's been going on. But yeah, that's total divergence from what we were talking about, but I expect that.
That's totally fine. It happens when you have like dog talk, so it's great. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about anthropomorphization. I have to slowly spell it out. So what do you think is going to be the biggest focus on helping improve a situation where anthropomorphization has created problems in a pet dog home? Like, how do we start to fix the issue?
Yeah. So like that's something I've been thinking about a lot. And what I finally come down to is like generally if you're talking to somebody, like I assume everybody that I'm talking to, at least when I start talking to them is at least somewhat rational and intelligent. And if they have a dog, people don't generally buy dogs going, I'm gonna just not treat this dog like crap. Like I don't really care about it. Like you get a dog because you're expecting you're going to love them and care for them and they're going to be your companion. So they have a certain amount of desire to make sure that dog's life is good. So instead of, and this is something that irritates me about a lot of, I can't call them trainers because I don't know that they're trainers, but people who are on the more, I guess, learned or serious side of dog training, like leaning in that direction, they kind of get a little virtue signally with people about this, where they start doing stuff where like, they're like, well, your dog shouldn't be treated like that. They don't like that. You should treat them like this. It's like, well, yeah, okay. You're not actually going to influence anyone to perform, or very few people are going to be influenced to perform better for that dog by being met every time they post a video with somebody who is apparently a working dog handler, working dog trainer, or some high level, supposedly some high level trainer that's saying, oh, well, you suck. And it's like, well, that's a terrible way to do it. Now there's people like me that's like, oh yeah, well, I'm going to go and become a working dog trainer, and then like, and that happens, right? But most people who have pet dogs, that's not what they're going to do. And so, yeah, exactly. So it's like what I try and not do. Well, first off, I try and not interact with people on the internet because I am a confrontational person. So like,
we
but if
learned
I
this
do
recently, didn't we?
Yeah. Oh no, I've definitely dealt with that my whole life, because I'm also a pretty confrontational person in person as well. But like, so like, but when I'm talking about things that I care about that are like, dog trainer, whatever it may be, right? I learned when I was in the military that you are not going to make any change about anything that's going on by being the asshole that's telling everybody that they're doing it wrong. Like, that's just not going to work. It's much better to go, hey, like, I know that you are trying to get to this end, right? So like, and I know you care about that, right? We both care about the same thing, which is, this end. So like for dogs, it's like, we care about the dog being, a balanced dog, it doesn't have a ton of unnecessary anxiety in its life and different things like that, So if we both are trying to get there, me telling you you're doing it wrong and that's all I'm doing is like not a good way to do it, And so it's better to go, hey, like I have made an effort to love my dog in the way that the dog understands love, and I'm not saying love is in like a very contemporary sort of love. I'm saying love is in love in this aspect is doing everything necessary to make sure that this dog has a good life, right? Like whatever it may be, but it's easier to just say love. So like, I want to like bring people into the fold of that by saying like, hey, I like that you're doing that. Have you ever considered this variable, right? Unfortunately, when we're talking about the internet, right? This is the problem with the internet. If you say anything that even can be remotely perceived as being antagonistic or not agreeing with whoever you're talking to, it's immediately assumed to be confrontation, which is why like you really shouldn't even have those conversations with people on the internet. In person, it's much better because you can see facial expressions, you're hearing their voice, you can identify tone, and you can show people and that like you actually do care. Like you're not here to go and hold above their head that, oh, like I know dogs better than you. Like you're not trying to do that. You're trying to be like,
I mean, sometimes
hey,
I like to do that.
Depends on the context. Yeah. I have a cool flag.
I like your flag.
But
well, actually I was thinking about this recently because I've had friends of mine who have been getting involved in the sport dog world who have maybe worked with other trainers here recently, and they've gotten advice from other trainers, and while the advice is not inherently wrong, there's something that just doesn't sit right with me with the way like they're receiving it. And I find that as like trainers get more experience, meaning they've been doing it longer, they start to get lazy in how they train humans. And instead of trying to educate people on, hey, this is the way I recommend doing it because X, Y, and Z, they just say, this is the one right way, do it this way, don't argue with me, and just don't do anything other than this, because they don't want to try to educate people on how it works, and why this is what we recommend. Although there are probably other ways that also work, this is X, Y, and Z.
Well, and I mean, and that's like, yeah, you definitely for sure see that with people that at least perceivably have like a significant amount of experience. But anybody who believes themselves to be experienced in something, you kind of run into that as well. Like, right? Like, I mean, everybody's been in a situation, probably actually been this person, where it's like somebody says something to you, right? Like, say somebody's like throws out some kind of like weird question about like classical conditioning, right? Or something like that. And like, for whatever the context, you kind of took it personally. Why you took a question personally is who knows, right? But it happens, and then you're like, so like you kind of run into like some two answers, right? Two ways of going about responding, right? Because you're already kind of mad, and it's like, okay, I'm going to go and drop the entire book on this guy and hit him with like some kind of like giant thesis on like why that is a stupid question,
But then that just makes you look like the asshole.
Right, exactly. And then the other one, because these are both bad ways of doing it, the other one is, oh, well, I obviously don't know what I'm talking about. I've only trained XYZ amount of dogs, right? Which neither of those are beneficial, really, So like instead, you could just say, hey, like, and I've done this, like because I've got people that ask me questions on the internet and stuff, and they're usually in town, and I'll be like, hey, like, I love that question. I cannot actually answer that over text. I would have to show you how that works, and you'd have to like come to club or something, and I'd show you then, or we can schedule like some private classes or something, and we can do it then. Because like, I mean, like, sure, I've been in situations where people have asked me, especially in like the tactical world, where it's like something that's the most like dumbest question I have ever heard. And I'm like, I don't have the time to answer this, because to answer this, I'd have to go over like all of the fundamentals of everything that I know. Right. And I don't have the time to do that right now. And like, I try really hard to be like, hey, like, I really can't answer that over this. Like, that's a giant conversation, but oftentimes it's more like, I don't care, like, and I try not be that guy, but I also don't care about the tactical world as much anymore. The dog world, because it is my business, I try and be a lot more gentle with people, especially since like tactical world, like it's an expectation that you're kind of a little more aggressive. Yeah. Abrasive. Yeah. That's perfect. Yeah. Well, with the dog world, it's actually the opposite is expected. I would expect you should be like the sweetest person on earth, and like rainbows.
Well, it's like with the pet dog world, back to this, bring it full circle back to anthropomorphization. Bring it back to it, we're essentially dealing with people's babies. Like even Medic is my child. Like, believe it or not, I gave birth to him when no one was looking. That's how it happened. That's how he came to be. But he's my baby. And so like, if, we're talking about his well-being, like, and you're being an asshole to me, I am going to not listen to you. I'm sorry. Like, we're talking about what's best for him. Like, it's not going to be, this is the one right answer, because I'm going to tell you, fuck you, bitch. Like, there's no one right answer when it comes to my dogs. Like, it's always a learning process.
And also, for anybody listening, because we've been throwing around anthropomorphization, the big long word that has every letter in the whole alphabet in it. I like definitions, right? Because like, I hate listening to somebody and going, I think I know what they mean, but they keep using words and I don't know what they mean. Anthropomorphization is essentially the idea of looking at something and injecting human thought and emotion into it. That's conceptually what it is. It's like you can literally anthropomorphize anything, like, and actually people do it at least semi-automatically. And so that's like one of the big difficulties with pets, right? Is because people already are are going to be doing it inherently. And I catch myself doing, like, I'll see Rook doing something or like Lemon doing something, and I'll be like, you know, and like my brain will generate like a backstory on why this is occurring, and then I'm like, okay, hold up, that's not actually what's going on here. That's just some romanticized like storybook tale that I just made up on the fly and has nothing to do with reality, you know. And so like that's why you know, because like you don't, people generally when they're dealing with stuff like that, they're not romanticizing or anthropomorphizing something because they don't care about it. Like nobody does that for anything they don't care about. And like you're saying, like it's like the baby, you know, like if somebody came up to like, and as a father, I can definitely understand this. If somebody came up to me and they're like, hey, your kid's kind of an asshole and you're not doing that right. I'd be like, oh, you want to see an asshole? Like, you know, like, yeah. And so like, you're never going to get anywhere with anybody, you know? And
What's
so
funny
like,
is that I feel like that's exactly something I would say about someone's baby, just because I don't like babies.
I didn't like kids until there was, you know, one of my blood in my house, and I was like, okay, this is pretty cool, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, but yeah, and so like, and that's why I try really hard. Like I really do try really hard to just not be that guy, because I've been that guy a lot, and it's like I'd rather just be like, hey, so people get really focused on like the whole, well, we need to bring about knowledge, right? Like knowledge in itself is worthless to me. It's knowledge first off, it needs to be palatable for somebody to actually ingest, and then it also needs to have a utilitarian aspect where it can actually be applied, right? So like if you just are spraying people down with dog knowledge, like who cares, you know? Yeah. Like, and if you're doing it abrasively, then definitely nobody cares, you know. But if you can make it palatable and be like, hey, I love that you're all into this, you should check out these videos of this guy on the internet or whoever, you know, that does some dog training. They talk about actually how to help with the dog's anxiety by treating the dog the way that they want to be treated, you know, and like finding stuff like that and like having that available to you so that you can give people that instead of being like, you're not doing that right, check this video out, here's my video evidence on how you're an idiot. Like that's definitely not going to work.
So
you know?
when I hired Kelly here, one of the first things I did with her as far as teaching you, Kelly, was I gave you a list of books to read. What was the first book that you read?
How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Dan, have you ever read that book?
I have not. It's on my list. I just haven't gotten to it. I have heard amazing things about it, though.
Mm-hmm. So the reason why I always put that on my list is because we have so much information that's going to be so beneficial to so many people. But just like you said, like if I'm just here, like this is information you need to know, no one's going to receive it. No one's going to give a shit about it. So, you know, we kind of need to prepare the humans that we're dealing with to receive the information and actually see it valuable. And one of the ways we do that is by creating the relationship we have with them. And there's all sorts of little tricks you can do to create that bond with the human very quickly during your like consultation. So that way you can start to give them information. They can already start to feel the value of your training as well. So just a little business advice, read that book.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's definitely like, it's one of those ones that's been fun. I'm like, I need to get to that. Like there's like another one that's completely unrelated that's on that list, but, well, it's funny. And also, right, here's the other aspect to that too, is like as dog trainers, talking to dog trainers, we have like a giant like extra vocabulary of dog training words that we use to talk about dogs that nobody actually gets, right? Mm-hmm. Like if you're telling somebody, yeah, we're using operant conditioning techniques to, you know, utilize primarily positive reinforcement to generate behaviors in a dog. What?
Yeah, we're jackpotting using that terminal marker, but we're going to use indirect reward to make it, you know, so that the dog has to really, you know, neglect that reward, pay attention, focus on the handler, and then release that reward using that terminal marker. Yeah, no, I get it.
Yeah, and I'm like, oh yeah, totally, you know, but like
you totally understood all of that.
You're even saying that to a handler, like a working dog handler that's like a police dog handler or something. They're like,
bro,
you know, like what?
I had a very high level police dog trainer, like a high level PSA trainer, someone who was titled level 3 PSA dogs, and came into like seminar and was like trying to describe how like to reward the dog out of heel or something like that. Like it's a really simple activity. And I'm like, so should I be marking with a continuation marker and then the release, or should I just be using a terminal marker? And he's like, a what? I'm like, how do you not know this?
And that's why, like, when I'm talking to people, especially about things that are more intricate, like dog training, when it's another trainer I'm talking to, that's why it's like definitions are like really critical. Because the amount of arguments between trainers that I've seen, that they're literally arguing the exact same thing. They're just using, it's just a definitional difference, is like crazy. But then, like, I was talking to a friend of mine who's in Tennessee now, I think. And we were just talking about like interacting with clients, and she's like the kind of person that is like super, super effective at talking to people. But she's like really, really figured out the way to talk to people in a way that's true and honest enough that it can be convicting without it being painful to hear, which is like very few people actually are good at that. And she's really fantastic at it. And like we were talking about talking to clients, and I'm like, and I don't remember how it was brought up, but she's like, yeah, Dan, like the problem is with you, and she knows how to talk to me. I'm not going to take things personally. So she's like, the problem with you is you have a huge vocabulary. You know exactly what you're talking about every single time you use it. And you use these big specific words that make sense to you and everybody else that knows your language, but nobody knows what you're talking about. And I'm like, yeah, I know. I'm very aware of this. Like,
but it's so important that like, so the thing is, like, I totally get it, because I have a huge vocabulary as well. It's not just dog training stuff, like normal vocabulary, like daily life, because if you're using words like very, meaning I'm very mad or I'm very happy, that is lazy talking. If you ever listen to Trump talk, he's a very lazy vocabulary person.
That's how I am too. Like, I mean, I have, for whatever reason, I don't know why I started doing this, but I like have identified ways, like through my speech patterns, to like make sure I'm not using the same like a similarly describing adjective more than one or two times in a row.
Yeah, because it feels weird when you do.
Yeah. And it's just like, and I like writing, like I've written like fiction and stuff like that, and just like as a hobby.
Nerd.
And so like I'm very aware of like just how like phonetic flow works, and like trying to describe things in an effective way. And then also being in the military, where you're trying to portray or relay information to somebody extremely quickly and extremely specifically. Like, it's like these words have meanings. I don't mean the synonym of this word. I mean exactly this word. Like, that's super critical in the military. Especially if you're like briefing like generals or like, somebody who's in charge of battalions, different things like that.
I used to be an intel analyst.
Oh yeah, for sure. So yeah, and so I get goofed up, and like I'm like, this is exactly the word that explains exactly what I mean. But the problem is, it's going to be something like parsimonious.
The fuck is that?
And people don't, huh?
What is that?
I love the word parsimonious because it's ridiculous. The word parsimonious essentially means the simplest way to describe something, but it's like this big long word. And I actually never use it in regular speech, but because I think it's hilariously ironic. But I've seen it used a lot in like college textbooks and stuff, in regards to like scientific method and different things like that. So like, and so like, and there's situations where I'm talking to like other trainers about identifying how to train a certain behavior, because or identifying problems with dogs, by like change the variables and different things like that. And I'm like, ooh, this would be the time you can use parsimonious here. And I'm like, no, we don't use parsimonious. That's an illegal word. It's ironic and stupid. And so like, but like, it's like words like that. It's like I know exactly this word that I can use for this, but I need to retrain myself. Because she's like, you need to talk to them like you're talking about kids instead of talking about dogs. And I'm like, yeah. Problem is that I don't even know how to talk about kids, because I just had a kid and I've like never really talked to people about kids.
I'm not sure, like the idea of like, talking about kids is where I would go with it. I would say like you ever heard the phrase, you're not an expert in something unless you can explain it to a 4-year-old?
Yep.
That's
Absolutely.
generally how I approach describing dog stuff to, dog owners who don't necessarily
Yeah.
have the vocabulary, because they're not going to understand those terms. So you have to think about describing it to someone who knows nothing about dogs, i.e. like a child. Now we're not obviously going to baby anything or like nothing like that, but making it simple, making it, hey, when dog does good things happen.
Right.
Dog does thing more. Like, we have to try and make it simple. And then, once that has meaning to them, because you can throw the big words at them all day long. You'd be like, the definition of operant conditioning is XYZ. It's not going to mean anything until it has a purpose and has a benefit to them and their life, essentially.
Well, and this is actually like the other side of the coin, where we were talking about training people like we train dogs, right? This is the part where you actually kind of do train people like their dogs, right? Because we want, with clients especially, we want to set them up for success from the very beginning. So we want to make it as simple as possible. And then as we go, that as they learn definitions and as they start to speak a similar language, right? Then you can start applying like some more like I guess exact terminology that you would generally use with like maybe some trainers.
Terminology,
like parsimonious, yeah. And so like, yeah.
Well,
and then
Kelly, what were you gonna say?
Oh, I was gonna say, like, because you were talking about training people, like you train the dogs, and I do it the exact same way. Like I create the behavior and then I name the behavior. So like in my like private lessons, because this whole conversation, I have a private lesson client right now that you are literally talking about.
The anthropomorphization client to a T.
Yes, to a T. But like when, for example, we just did lesson 1, I tell her this is what we're doing. I show her like how to do it. Let's say we're at the beginning of our first lesson, which is the heel lesson. I'm just focused on her saying good and then feeding the dog. So once we get that really good rhythm of good, feed, then I stop her and I'm like, so what we're doing is called classical conditioning. And then I explain it a little more, and then I can use what she's already done as the example. And then she has a super thorough understanding.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. Well, and then kind of switch gears on that too is like and I'm going to use dog training terms for this because I'm talking about training people like we train dogs, right? Like you got to pay attention to the classical conditioning component of when you're talking to a person, right? It's like, just like a dog, like if I'm doing nothing but compulsion training on the dog, it's probably not going to really want to do any of the behaviors. It's not really an enjoyable experience, right? So like those of us that have been in the military, when you're in an environment where you are on a variable reward system, which is what the military absolutely is, and they lessen the intensity of that reward or the productivity of that reward over time until you're left with nothing but compulsion. And then you're just like fighting for getting to the next rank or getting into the next school or whatever it may be. It's like people are surprised that people have psychological issues, well, that's the problem with training dogs that way too. Like you've got a dog that it's like, okay, I need this dog to sit. I'm going to prong it up until it sits down. I'm going to release when it finally puts its butt on the ground. It's like, yeah, it sits, but like, man, like, does it even enjoy doing this? Is it getting any rewards? Is there anything actually in it for the dog? Or is it just now in a state of constantly trying to do the right thing so it's not feeling uncomfortable or in pain, And so like, and that's like the thing, this is where like the training humans like dogs kind of thing on my end became really interesting, is because I had realized
I drew you a picture.
Oh my gosh. Oh wow. I could put that on a shirt.
That's my plan. For anyone who isn't watching the YouTube video, who's listening to this on Spotify, I drew a picture of a dog getting kind of choked by the collar, and he's thinking, "Harder, Daddy."
I thought, again, I don't want to inject what I expect that dog's thinking.
No.
But like, while I was at the school, I was kind of paying attention and like finding certain parallels between like how police dogs are being trained versus how like humans in professions that require a high level of violence are trained, right? And me coming from a Marine Corps background, there's a lot of similarities, and it's not necessarily a good thing for the dogs. It is, right? Because for the dogs, because they're very highly rewarded, right? They're because like bite work is like very heavy reward, so it's like they're highly rewarded, they love their job and all of that. It's really great, and they get this really fulfilling life, and and then they get old, and then they're not here anymore. And so like, but like with humans, right, we live longer, which is kind of in a way like can be an unfortunate thing in how we are trained when we are young, so for example, like if I was a green dog, in the Marine Corps, where I'm being trained to fight in wars, and like if anybody who's been to Marine Corps boot camp, they know that the emphasis it is heavier on being able to be violent than it is necessarily on the intelligence of applying that violence appropriately, right?
That
So
sounds
like
like
when
dogs.
exactly but we're humans, right? So this is like the bad side of it when you're being trained like a dog, right? So like I'm in the Marine Corps, I'm being rewarded for being extremely quick to act, and being rewarded for being able to be incredibly violent when necessary, and then of course, as you continue, and as a green dog continues after they've learned to bite well, now we're going to put obedience on, and then like you finish with your basic training, boot camp, and then you move into like your infantry training, and then they teach you how to do it better, but also do it with a level of discretion, and then you move to your unit, and then you're trained on that discretion, right? But the problem is that you're in an environment that's constantly rewarding more energy, more focus, more aggression, more intensity constantly. Like there's never an end. And what's your reward? Your reward is hitting those gates. Like it's like, oh, well, you're good, but you haven't been a fire team leader. And then it's like you get to be a fire team leader. Now the reward has changed. Now you're on that variable reward system. Like now we need to become a squad leader. And then like, did you even deploy? And then you've got all these gates that you're like constantly trying to hit because you've been conditioned to be intense about achieving your goals, which is a good thing. It's good to be intense about achieving your goals. But the problem is that when you, and now as a father, I've had to switch gears because I've always been like that. And like as an infantry Marine, when you're met with something that's extremely loud and intense, you're immediately like, I'm meeting that with intensity, right? Like that's just automatic, And so now as a father, right, like, and I've been conditioning in this way now, and I have a baby, and like last night he woke up at like 3 a.m. and he's like screaming and crying, and my wife is like trying to get him to go back down, and then like it wasn't working, and then like I get up and I'm like, I'm gonna go, this kid is going to lay down. Like I was mad, and it was just automatic. It was just like, okay, intensity, like just automatic. And then as I was walking over there, I'm like, let's be patient. Let's be sweet about this. Let's make a connection as a human rather than problem solution.
Right.
And so then I sat down with him. I'm like, hey buddy, I can bring Rook in here. He can lay with you. Do you want him to lay with you? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, cool. And then like, you're going to stay in here, and then, I'm going to go to bed, and I'm not coming back. Okay. Like just go to sleep. You're okay. I'm in the next room, which not like a year ago, I'd come in and been like, shut up, lay down. I'm not dealing with this right now. Like, but now I've had to actually grow. Huh?
That doesn't work. Just go to sleep.
Your baby's not
like,
wrong yet.
This is one of those things I learned being like a balanced trainer, right? Is like, I have to invest in you. So, and especially for a child, this is like super long term, I invest in you, and then I also discipline you when necessary, right? I'm not a compulsion trainer, and I'm not a parent that will be a compulsion style parent either. you know? So it's like, and that's where it's like I flipped, and it's like now I'm training a human. Like I am solely responsible for this human not being in jail when he's 18 or 16 or
So
whatever.
have you
right? So,
clicker conditioned your dog or your kid yet?
no, but I've joked about it a lot.
You
Like
should.
a lot. I have considered just like clicking and then throwing him a graham cracker.
So this is really bad, but I've been classically conditioning my husband, and I can't talk about it yet in case he listens to this
Yeah.
because I don't want to ruin it. But I am working on like some classical conditioning stuff. So stay tuned.
Yeah, you can just put Cheerios in the treat and train, and that way you can train your child. Oh wait, how old is your kid now? Are they beyond the
He's
Cheerios
almost
phase?
2. He's like just about a month away from being 2.
Oh, they
Get him
still
on
like
the-
Cheerios.
You're walking by the
Oh,
little candy dispensers. No, I said no candy.
I was just gonna get a popper for him because he likes balls.
There you go, a ball popper. I like it.
Just
You
like-
have e-collar too.
Yeah, I was just gonna like really work on like drive channeling with him, particularly like really try and like lean into prey and just like pop, and then my kid, like 2-year-old, just goes.
Yeah, teach your child to bite.
Yeah.
Get him on the
No,
sleeve.
like, oh man, that was something that like freaked me out. And this is like totally not about dogs, but like, you know, like when you hold a kid, sometimes you like got them here and they're like laying face down, and like not face in your arm, but like out to the side, right? And like at least my kid, he would like do this thing where he'd like clench up, like, and I don't know if it was like some kind of fear response or something like innate to humans. I don't know what it was, right? But it was super annoying. And like there's multiple times where he bit my wife when he would do this. And so like he would do that, and I would be anticipating him biting me, and I would get like immediately angry. Like he'd be crying and then clench up and then go and then like force his face into my arm, and I'm like, man, like I need to put this kid down. Like this is making me mad.
You're like yeet the kid across the room. Jesus.
You start choking him off the bite. You grab his shirt.
Yeah,
Hey, Kelly, that's a nice shirt you got there.
Thanks. It says I love boobies, and it's a blue-footed booby. I don't know if you can see it.
there'll be yeah, I'll get my kid into like MMA so that he can get like, you know, work that drive channeling and stuff.
Good. I like it.
We'll go and trial him, you know, when he hits 3.
First PSA 3 on a human.
God, yes.
I was saying, I'd love to see somebody try and do it with like a monitor lizard.
Oh, that'd be
It's the
Like, can you
AKC registered lizard, wasn't it? Some sort of like there's some sort of like lizard that someone registered with AKC as a purebred like German Shepherd or something.
But those Continental Kennel Club that
I don't
people are
know.
doing.
Something stupid.
Can you imagine being like a decoy in a building search and a small dinosaur comes running around the corner, like nuke your leg? Like, that would be horrifying.
Yes.
I'd be like Chris Pratt, just
With your clicker. Click, 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 click.
yeah, just like
I like that
Like,
we
what does
all
that
have
mean,
clickers
man?
like readily available. By the way, I found my infamous. You see what color that is?
The blue one?
Found the blue
Blue.
one.
No, that's literally my clicker. You sold it to me, and then I left it at your house. So you just refound my clicker that I forgot.
Yep.
I paid you $10 for it because it went through the washing machine.
it's been
So now
reallocated.
I know. Now it's been
My clicker. It's okay. I just sent you way too many slip leashes for the amount of money you gave me, so we'll call it even.
Oh, perfect. Also, I got someone to order a clicker from you. So
I know. Yeah, when people, God, I really shouldn't say this on the podcast, but when you buy clickers from the website, if that's the only thing you buy, I almost lose money.
Oh, well, I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
I can see it. Thankfully,
Because
I don't have to
I
get mine
put free
clickers.
shipping on everything from eColor Tech. And when you buy things from eColor Technology as a dealer, like there's free shipping as long as it's more than $25.
Well, did you consider putting like a $2 shipping on every item, and then the few items that do have to like get screwed up like clickers, then you're already prepaid for them?
Oh, you think shipping's only $2? No, it's only like $4. So it wasn't that bad.
Everyone's paying $2 on their order, then you have a little secret stash of shipping money.
No, there's some items that are free shipping and some that are not. So
just tax people.
Yeah.
yeah.
You're like, oh, this is your training tax on top of all the other ones.
Yeah.
So
I'm like, just buy it from me in person. It's so much cheaper. Okay, so we're gonna start to wrap this up because I know
For
that
sure.
we could definitely talk for hours.
Definitely.
So if I know we've talked about a million things today, but if you could kind of tie everything together or like bring it all together in a way that is, what is the bottom line up front, I guess bottom line of the big bottom, to help people understand the whole point of the conversation we had today.
Well, it's essentially like understand where you're trying to go, right? Like, and like, with pet dogs, that's going to be, or with dogs, if you love dogs, it's love dogs the way they want to be loved. And then like people, if you're working with people, if your end goal is to train people for law enforcement, military, whatever it may be, understand how to move them towards that in a way that is beneficial overall to their development. And then similarly with humans, whether it be clients, it's very similarly, law enforcement, stuff like that. You move them towards where you want to go. And, when you have more interpersonal situations where you have like family members, friends, people you care about, like understand how to interact with them in the way that is beneficial, or that like love them the way that they want to be loved. Like, like your dogs, I love each dog differently according to how they need to be. And every single person is taken as much as I can, case by case. I care about you in the way that you need and it need to be cared about in the way that you can absorb that.
Yeah, I like it. Super simple. Awesome. Kelly, what are your last thoughts?
I think I have a lot of thoughts, but I'm not gonna keep us going for another hour and a half. But
why not? That's fine. I gotta go to club at some point, so let's go.
Yeah, I'm heading over to the shelter to look at an aggression case pretty soon here. So
yay.
Either way, I mean, I got time.
But Kelly, what you got?
I guess like a big thing is like realize that the dog is a carnivore. Like we've domesticated the hell out of it, but you're looking at like a carnivore that's hardwired to chase prey, kill prey, and be wild. And we look at that a lot from like a very domesticated primate view, where we have hardwired things that are more like heavy on social stuff, or maybe like weird I don't know. I'm not a human person. I only speak from my experiences.
Anthropologist.
Yes. But like, don't view your dogs as the toddler, view it as a wild animal. And no matter if it's a tiny Chihuahua or a giant Great Dane, they're all meant to kill stuff. You know what I mean? It's not fluffy.
Yeah, absolutely. And not to be like a devil's advocate or anything like that, but, I think that we as educators, so we educate humans on how to handle their dogs. There is a lot of value, I think, in creating analogies, but not saying that I am promoting the anthropomorphization of the dogs.
Getting faster. You're getting faster.
I think it's actually slowing down more. I'm not sure. But like finding analogies, because there's a lot of analogies of how we raise children, like we were talking about before with the crate and the crib, and how we raise dogs, because we use the same thing, punishment and reward and structure, just like we do with developing well-rounded children. I think applies to dogs too, but for dogs it's just going to look a little bit different. And I think that people need to understand that, because the reward for a child is not going to be the same as the reward for the dog. And I think that understanding that big difference is really the key to not anthropomorphizing your dog.
Well, and that like I tell almost every single client, I'm like, your dog doesn't speak English. Yeah. Like you're communicating with the dog with body language, like different kinds of cues, verbal cues, the collar, whatever it may be, the harness, whatever you're doing, you're communicating with your dog. They have no way of actually fully conceptualizing what you're actually saying through words to them, and that's the other thing about like kids, that like I'm so like dog, and then like I go and work with my kid doing whatever, we're playing or whatever, and like I'll want to like get on him right now about something that he didn't do right, because I'm like, you're like, I gotta get that prong in there, like
timing is so important.
Yeah, I gotta get that timing. When in reality, with a human kid, you can be like, hey buddy, you shouldn't do that, and here's why, and you can explain it, so there's actually a conceptual understanding of why that's not good. With dogs, they have to learn essentially through trial and error in different contexts.
Yeah. And that also makes me think of like with puppies, and especially a lot of the COVID dogs, like from back in COVID. And I know, forget who it was, someone did a really good video about this, dogs not being able to handle pressure because people, you know, kind of coddled them as babies, they trained them, you know, force free, whatever, versus like humans, we kind of have to go get that pressure from the world. If you're going to go be
Yep.
out in society, someone's going to not agree with you, versus
Yeah.
our dog, and someone's like, oh my gosh, you pulled on his collar, they get so mean and abusive. I want to give my dog the pressure he might experience in that controlled environment, because he's not going to go to elementary school and the teacher's going to tell him, no, he can't do that. Like, that's not going to happen.
Well, and something on that too, that I always think is interesting, and I'm not going to cite the studies on this. I'm like 99.9% sure this is true. But I know there's been studies about identifying what makes people resilient to emotional psychological trauma, right? And one of them at least is through their life dealing with a certain increasing amount of stress, right? But that stress needs to have a fall off for them to recover, so that they ever actually do recover at all. And the more this occurs, the better people get at handling stress. And it's actually like a huge I believe the study was for PTSD, and they found that people who had lives where they encountered difficulty, whether it be emotional or whatever, and they were able to like get over it and then come back down and like relax for a little bit, conceptualize what happened, make some rationalizations, and then they can move into things that could be traumatic to most people, but aren't at all traumatic to them, because they've created the necessary psychological faculties to just generally handle them. And that's something that like you see with like military guys. Like what this says is actually this is in favor of balanced training, because if somebody is doing all compulsion training, you're never really giving the dog that point of reward, or that moment to relax. Or even if you're doing bite training, you're doing all defense, and you don't do any prey to like let the dog chill and realize it's actually winning, like you're just going to have a stressed out dog, and like humans, the same way. You can hit them with something traumatic now, and they've been their whole life having an upward ramping of difficult experiences their whole life without any reprieve. And then now it's another thing that my life sucks for, and it's like, yeah, it does,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I remember, God, I had a guy that worked for me. He was awesome. He was basically like the manager of my training facility, and he basically ran the show. And that way I could focus on building the business up and doing more things and expanding and all this other crazy stuff. So he ran so many of the operations. He helped take care of like our younger trainers. He did everything. And so when I found out, like the day he let me know that he was putting in his notice because he was going to be going on to bigger, better things, like I wasn't mad about it, but like immediately it's like, oh shit, like this is going to suck. Like this is a really like hard thing. It wasn't bad. He wasn't doing anything wrong. We have no hard feelings, but I was like, oh crap, this is a really hard thing I have to deal with. But like, because of my time in the military and because of all the challenges that has put me through, like within 30 minutes of him telling me that, I was like, okay, this is how I'm going to move forward. This is what I'm going to do. I got to call these people. I got to set this up. And like, it's just like, okay, this is just another thing we're dealing with because we've prepared for it. And I feel like the same thing for our dogs. And people don't understand this too. Like when you see things like introducing leash pressure for young puppies or conditioning the e-collar at a young age, it's about teaching the dogs that when you feel this, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a bad thing that you're going to be, devastated over, but it's just, conditioning them to learn how to deal with it at that young age.
Yeah. Like, with my private lesson yesterday, the dog has like a lot of fear issues. And so she's kind of on the more side of coddling it. And she stepped on the dog's paw while we were teaching heel, and she went to go have the full-on drop to your knees and I'm so sorry, my baby, I just amputated your leg off. And I was like, no, kind of, restart what we're doing. We're back at the attention game, just puppy, 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 look at me. And then as soon as we get that engagement, kind of jackpot it, make it still a positive experience, but the world's not falling apart because you were uncomfortable for 5 seconds.
Yeah.
It's better from here.
Well, and like you definitely don't want to reward that, when somebody fails, and you see this with humans, when somebody fails at something and they get rewarded for that failing, whether socially, whatever, right? Like that, man, like that's so like disgusting. And,
Yeah.
and because what it really does is like you might have the best intentions, right? Where it's like, oh, you fail, and it's like, well, was it really failure, or is everybody else X, Y, and Z, and stuff like that. And like you make these rationalizations. What the person ends up doing is they learn that, hey, upon not doing well at something, not only does that actually become success because I get rewarded for it, but everybody who says that I'm wrong is stupid and evil for like attacking me for it. And it's like, and then they're like, well, I don't understand why I have massive amounts of anxiety and depression. It's like, well, you're literally going about life expecting to be rewarded for being a failure. And I'm not talking about any kind of specific societal definition of failure either. I'm just talking about upon what is failure to you, being rewarded for that enough, and maybe even being punished for being successful, which happens as well. People will generate a certain complex about that. And then you have people that they literally cannot function in life. And I've seen people like this in person, and I'm like, how are you alive? I mean, I can't imagine surviving with that kind of mentality. I wouldn't be here right now if I had that,
Yep. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and wrap that up. Thank you, Dan, so much for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure talking with you as always. I know Dan and I talk on a regular basis, and half the time it turns into like an hour-long conversation. And it's always great. I never mind it whatsoever. So I hope to have you on again in the future, talking about some of our other topics we have lined up. We have a lot of great topics that we're looking to do. So hopefully we'll have you back out here. So for our listeners who are listening, go ahead and tell everybody again the name of your business, what it is you do, and if you have your social media links, your website, let's go ahead and tell everybody all of that stuff right now.
Yeah, so my business is Cross Tier Canine. If you go onto Instagram, it's like cross_tier_canine_LLC, because it wouldn't let me do anything else. But you can find us with our little like diamond shaped emblem, like you can see over there, and then our website is crosstiercanine.com, and that's tier is in TIER. And that always gives people up, and I've considered maybe changing that somehow, but yeah. And we do pet training, sport obedience, police dog stuff, tracking stuff, detection, all kinds of stuff. So we pretty much, if you want to train a dog to do it, we'll work with you to get them trained to do it.
Love it. Yeah, I've seen Dan train. I'm a huge fan of his training methods. So if you're in the Billings, Montana area, is that right?
Yep.
If you're in the Billings, Montana area and you're looking for help, definitely reach out to Cross Tier. Talk to Dan. He's great. I can guarantee you're going to have an excellent experience working with him. Dan, do you offer anything virtual for people who are further away?
Not yet, no. I'm looking at, because I've had a lot of people ask me questions. I had a guy from LA call me up one day to talk about training dogs, and I got stuck in a 2-hour-long conversation, as I usually do. So I'm considering doing something where it's like, posting, some videos and stuff on how to train. But as we know, as trainers, like if you're doing all of your stuff posting how to train online, you're not training dogs in person. So it's kind of a difficult thing to manage. So yeah, and so like I'll probably do something like that, maybe a YouTube that's got members only access or something like that in the future. But
yeah,
if I got that rolling, I'll let you know immediately. Yeah,
hit me up if you're interested in doing some stuff. We offer a lot of like virtual options as well, and we do have like individualized like links to do that as well, so we can kind of talk through and brainstorm some ideas that might work.
For sure.
There's a lot of stuff out there that you can try for sure.
Oh yeah, I'd love it. Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, awesome. All right, Kelly, what you got?
Nothing but socials, and if you have any updates, but I'm in tech.
Tinky passed tracking.
Yay, Tinky!
Awesome.
I knew he could track.
Level 1 tracking, we passed with 5 points to spare.
See, you didn't feel hard enough.
Well, actually, it was funny because right before we started the track, like we were walking up to the track and I stepped on his foot.
Poor Stink. Did you drop to your knees and start cuddling him and crying?
No, the only thing I said was dumbass.
You bitch.
Because after I checked in, we start walking to the track and he sees the tracking start marker flag, whatever. He starts getting super excited, starts bouncing like he does. And one of the times he came down right under where I was going to step, and well, there it is.
I did have a tracking question for you. It's like a 2-second question. When you're doing IGP tracking and you've got like 3 people doing the same level tracking, is everyone going like doing the track on the same track?
No.
Or are there different plots for everyone?
Everyone gets their own track.
Gosh, that's a lot of land.
We'll talk about, yeah, it is. We'll talk about that.
Yeah, if you guys want to talk about tracking one of these days, like I am for it. I love it.
No, because your tracking is different. If I try to track the way that you track, I am never going to pass IGP tracking because IGP tracking is tracking the dumbest way possible. I'm going to lose all of my IGP fans, all 2 of them.
I'm too scared to start tracking. So.
Oh, it's so fun.
Get out of here.
It's so easy. It's so easy to start. It's so fun.
Dan, I've been struggling with tracking for like over 2 years now. Do not say it is easy. The first time we tracked, we got 22 points. The next time we did so much better. We got 34.
I don't know about IGP. I mean like operational tracking. That's what I'm into. So that I don't know. That could be terrible. But it's operational tracking to start it, it's a lot of fun. It's pretty easy. Concepts with it are really easy too.
We can do an episode on tracking one of these days. I'll have you back for that.
I want to talk about
I'd love that. Stuff. Yeah.
Kelly, what do you want to talk about?
I want to talk about police dog stuff.
Yeah. Well, we can talk about that too someday. Not today though, because I have to go to club where my dogs will actually get to bite people in PSA stuff because
and I gotta
that trial sleeve.
I gotta head to this shelter and look at this problem dog they got. So
Mother Teresa over here volunteering his time to help the less fortunate asshole dogs. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, there's a lot of them.
We've done a lot of shelter dogs, so I get it. Kelly, go ahead and list all of our socials and email and website and Facebook and all that stuff.
Airborne Canine and Airborne Canine Texas is where you find us. I'm Texas. She's regular, boring, plain Jane. We're both on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, Airborne Canine or Airborne Canine Texas, depending on who you love more. And then contact at Airborne Canine if you want to email us. You'll probably talk to Ashley because I don't answer their emails. And all of our contact information is on airbornecanine.com. If you are a dog gear nerd and super picky, check out the gear shop because we don't sell stuff we don't like and we are very picky and have tried literally everything. So check out the gear shop on the website. And I think that's it.
Buy the treat and train.
Buy the fucking treat and train. Stop thinking about the treat and train and buy the fucking treat and train. And don't wash your remote because the remote is not waterproof.
The remote is not waterproof. And if you guys are really interested in getting into the more advanced stuff, I know today's conversation was a very advanced topic. I know our primary listeners are our pet dog owners, but if this stuff has sounded interesting, is something you want to learn more about, and you're not ready to make a huge financial investment, you should definitely check out our sport dog club. It's our unofficial sport dog club. It's general sport dog and advanced skills, including bite work and sport dog obedience, things like that. That is Thursday nights here at our location. If you're interested in tracking for whatever reason, God help you, we have our tracking club. We normally meet on Sunday mornings, bright and early at 8:00, which is why I hate tracking because it's too early. But we are doing it. We have various locations this Sunday, which I'm pretty sure this is going to be released well after this Sunday, but we are tracking at the Comfort First Heating and Cooling at the intersection of Highway 1 and Lark Lane, i.e. meet at Airborne Canine, and we're going to go across the street.
That is North Carolina. The only cool stuff I offer is scent detection. That's it.
If you want to do scent detection in Texas, call up Kelly. She loves it. All right, folks. And Yeah, that's all I got. The only update I had was this weekend was a huge success. Tinky passed his tracking level 1. He passed his GPR, which is obedience and protection level 3. It was awesome. He did great. I was so proud of him. Everyone was very impressed with him. I was impressed with him. And yeah, it was awesome. So if you are interested in learning more about sports, hit us up, sign up for our lessons, buy our stuff. Come hang out, talk dog stuff. I'm always here. Buy a Nookshook. We have it in stock, ready to go. You can pick up at your convenience. Just let me know when you want to be here. And yeah, email us, call us, text us, comment on our stuff, like, share, follow, all that good stuff. Subscribe. Yeah. Otherwise,
outro.
Yeah, no, right. Sorry. Go outside, go train with your dogs, and enjoy your day with your dog.